The Middle Belt Forum has said President Muhammadu Buhari has failed woefully to deliver his promise to completely eliminate Boko Haram in the country. They noted that the president, rather than fulfilling his promise to Nigerians, watched helplessly while the insurgents spread from the northeast to all parts of the country. Meanwhile, the president has replied to the accusations over the worsening security situation, saying that he has fulfilled his promises to Nigerians on tackling Boko Haram, insurgency, reviving the economy, and fighting corruption. Well, joining us to discuss this is George Ashiru. He is the ADC Lagos State Chairman. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Ashiru.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be online with you tonight.
Great. Your candidate for the position of president is also, of course, running against the candidate of the APC. And if anything that the president has said in light of this conversation is something to go by, then maybe we don't have a conversation to have this night. Or is the president saying something that is not true?
Well, essentially, the party in power, or the leader that is in power in government, has a duty to defend its reputation and defend its policies. And but we, the electorate and the opposition, it's our duty to also bring forth why we believe that you can do better. So I think one of the hallmarks of good leadership is to accept a positive criticism and to acknowledge and review the issues that are related to that criticism in view of correcting them rather than simply sweeping them under the carpet. So it's very clear to everybody that there isn't enough peace in certain regions of Nigeria, apart from the incessant attacks of the militants. We also have the ongoing kidnappings and other violences, including now political violence. And we may not have enough resources to tackle them. There's nothing wrong with the government simply telling us we're doing our best, we don't have enough resources, we don't have enough boots on ground, enough manpower, enough equipment, enough intelligence, and then let the National Assembly begin to vote, to increase the resources. But it's better than to simply say, oh, everything is all right and we are good to go.
But do you not believe that maybe this is what the president believes is the situation? Because half the time I remember in January 2022, we started off the year with massacres, with killings, in different parts of the country. And the whole of 2022, if you look at all the events that happened, 80% of them were, insecurity related issues. So, but every time Mr. President reacted to this, he always said he was shocked, he was surprised. So could it be that Mr. President believes or has been made to believe that insecurity is a thing of the past in this country and that we're not facing economic issues, neither are we facing, underemployment or unemployment?
Well, the truth about it is that, again, like I said, the government will defend itself every time. Even with the elephant in the room, there will still be a robust defense of the policies, because politically it's a cost to accept that you have failed in any area, that gives a weapon to the opposition to campaign against the government. On the other hand, we can also say the integrity of the president is the reason we believe that the president would not lie when he says, in his own opinion, everything is going hunky dory. And I think essentially it is the briefing that the president gets that he's going to base his opinions on. So if all he gets is we're winning, we're doing well, you can give us 1 trillion naira, we're wiping out so many thousands of insurgents every second. As long as that's the briefing that the president gets through the security briefing, that's what he's going to present to the electorate. But we are on the ground, and the people in the affected regions will be the testament or the testimony of the effectiveness of these security operations. And perhaps this is the reason why good leaders have town hall meetings. You go to the communities affected, you listen to them. And when you listen to them, it informs your judgment and then informs your actions as a leader.
What does this say about the leadership style of Mr. President? Let's not also forget that once the president became our president, sworn into office, it took a long time for us to be able to even get him to speak to us as a people. And it's always been one person speaking and the other one coming to debunk this and that. Looking back at the Buhari administration from 2015, what can we say about his leadership style? For a person who tried to run for this office 4 times and finally got in, can we really say that it was a chance that was well utilized?
Well, I think the president himself has spoken in time past, when he first became president, that why did Nigerians choose to make him president at his advanced age, which means the kind of dynamism and energy and quickness of action and reaction and thought that you will associate with a younger candidate. He had gone past his prime in that regard. So he would have to basically delegate a lot of things because of his advanced age. He will have to delegate.
He did have a choice not to. He did have a choice not to run. He could have decided not to run, knowing that he's too old to run or he's not energetic, as he said. He could have chosen not to.
Sometimes you run for office because it is required of you by the people. It's not always a matter of I. Not all politicians are personally ambitious. They serve because the people believe that their leadership or style or their integrity is required. Don't forget the reason that people decided to vote for the president the 4th time around was because they felt that corruption had reached a level and they were holding on to his former reputation as a military head of state that he would be able to curb it. So at that time, that was the kind of leadership required. Whether or not it was efficiently used and that the integrity was sufficient, and the difference between political leadership and military leadership, all of them obviously have come to play, and the result is what we see today.
Let's break some things down. Let's go back to the 3 things, the 3 pillars through which Mr. President came into office, most importantly insecurity, fighting insurgency, building the economy, and of course fighting corruption. But I want to start with building the economy. Let's look at the economy right now, even though the whole world in 2020 shut down and then most countries are still dealing with post-COVID. But before COVID and now and where we are today, how well has the Buhari administration dealt with our economy? Looking at all of the issues relating to banking, agriculture, small-scale loans, and all kinds of things. How well have we done, especially also with the CBN governor taking on responsibilities of the Minister of Agriculture, et cetera, Can we give a pass mark in that regard?
Well, no, of course not. I mean, the economy of the country since 1999 has shrunk. The GDP of the country has shrunk from its peak sometime in between 2010 and 2014. Our economy peaked. Our GDP was over $500 billion US, and now it's just barely over $400 billion US. And so definitely our economy has shrunk by about 20%, and that's a huge shrink of any economy. And the exchange rate has multiplied by a factor of about 200-300%. Again, that makes inflation extremely difficult to manage because we are in an import-dependent economy, and our sole export, critical export, which is what funds the government, is crude oil. And even the crude oil, we are not able to export all that we can produce. We can produce over 2 million barrels a day. We're not able to even export most of them because of oil theft and bunkering and all that. So, I mean, it's all eyes can see. These are the things that they call the disease of the eyes. So clearly the economy has not done well. It's not been well managed. The ways to stabilize it has been, let's inject more funds into the economy, let's give out more contracts, let's focus on infrastructure. Like Lagos State is spending almost 60%, if not more, of its entire 2022 budget on infrastructure. In the hope that when you flood the markets, then it will encourage buying and the economy will float. But the Human Development Index for each individual shows that poverty is still rising. And so clearly, some of these policies are not influencing and affecting the lives of individuals. And you can see the effect of this in the Japa syndrome, the terrible inflation. Now, people will say that post-COVID, world economy has been in a meltdown. Post-COVID, the inflation has risen. Post-COVID, there's always something to blame. But other countries have been able to tweak the economy. The inflation rate in America is at the lowest for a long time. The gas price is at its lowest since before even the war in Ukraine. And so that means somebody somewhere is taking the right decisions. And that's really all we need. We just need the right people taking the right decisions to correct the anomalies in the system. Because there will be anomalies year in, year out forever. So that's what having the right technocrats and the right political will, that's why it's important.
Talking about having the right people in office, it took the president almost 6 months for us to get a list of people that would be making up our executive council. And then they now showed up. I remember vividly the president said he was looking for men and women who, were upright and had no, stain or dirt in terms of cockroaches or skeletons in their cupboard. But here we are. I laid that foundation because I'm going somewhere. We have an economic council where the vice president chairs, and we have the minister for finance and several other people that make up that particular council. I would shudder if you disagree with me on the fact that the people who make up that council are very, very intelligent technocrats and professionals. So is it that they're bereft of ideas or they choose not to implement the ideas that they have? Which is it?
Well, to start with, waiting for 6 months to appoint ministers is an indication that if thought was not given to the idea of these ministers before 1-1, it would give the impression that the president did not believe he was going to win, and so he was not ready. Normally, your cabinet is ready. They are called the shadow cabinet. They are ready. These are your policy think tanks. They are already talking to you. You already have ideas of what to do when you are in power. They will let you know, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to tackle this one, tackle that one, when they are still inaugurated, so that as soon as you get in, they are good to go, they're ready to move. So that was an error, I believe. And the momentum subsequently was that they were doing catch-up. Things had already gone awry before the political leaders, the technocrats took over, and the civil servants were managing the economy. And the civil servants, I'm sorry to say, they just follow the book. They don't think outside the box most of the time. And so we were just basically tinkering with, let's try this, let's try that, let's try that. And just when we thought the economy was going to stabilize, COVID came, and we couldn't export anything because nobody was buying oil. And then as soon as COVID exited, the pandemic exited in the world economic scene, then inflation came, and then the war in Ukraine came. So it now became, running after being reactive rather than proactive, because you didn't prepare for all those sort of things. So essentially, not just having eggheads, just having people with fantastic degrees is never enough. You must, there's a thing in Greek called katapizo, which means perfectly prepared. You must always be perfectly prepared for every scenario. A general that goes to war always presumes every situation. If I take this, what will happen? It's like a chess game. If I do this, what will happen? So I have to have plan B, plan C, plan D, and the right people, and I should be able to take action when necessary in order to get the right kind of results. So I think at the end of the day, a leader is expected to take responsibility for the weakness of the team in implementing their ideas and policies.
Let's look at Nigeria's debt profile, which is one of the things that, on a normal day would make some of our leaders, our heroes past, turn in their graves. And for want of a better way to describe it, a lot of people have compared previous. So this is the thing, in Nigeria, for every time we have bad leadership, we try to praise the leadership before that and say, oh, it wasn't so bad. I think it was better. And so it makes us continue in that circle of mediocrity. But looking at Nigeria's debt profile right now, and the last amount of money that the president has asked the National Assembly for, and he's also put a caveat that if they do not approve the money in time, there's more interest that's going to accrue on the money. How do we even begin to dig ourselves out of this hole? Because whether we like it or not, it'll take decades to be able to, wiggle our way out of this one. And many would also point to the Obasanjo administration for some of the debt cancellations that we had under his government.
Well, the fact that we do budget deficiting, it's not really the key problem. I mean, for the size of the economy, what is being borrowed in international financial balance is still a manageable percentage of our overall economy. So that's not really the issue. The issue really is, where's the money spent? What is the money used for? Is it used to re-industrialize Nigeria, make us competitive? Are we spending it on education or agriculture that is going to feed the people, or education, vocational education, technical education, that will ensure that in the next 5-10 years, we're going to produce more millionaires? Or are we simply spending it building bridges that cost $1 billion and things like that that don't have direct impact on the living conditions of the people? So that's really where the problem is, when you borrow and then you spend it on things that are not key priorities of the people. And that's because not enough attempt is made to speak to the people about their priorities. You know, a lot of leaders just don't do enough consultation. They just speak with the civil servants, and then the policy is out and then money is spent. And then what is the accountability behind this expenditure? So for every 1 billion, are we sure that, you know, most of it is spent, or is Pareto, where, you know, 20% of it is actually spent for what it's meant for? So if you borrow, and America is extremely leveraged. The gearing ratio is unbelievable. However, whenever they spend money, they spend it in something that in the next 2-3 months, you will see the impact on the economy. But here, we just borrow, but we don't feel the impact. The cost of goods are not coming down. The cost of electricity is not coming down. Cost of fuel is not coming down. All the indices that makes a business succeed, and therefore the economy succeed, they are still unstable. So that's the question. If you keep borrowing and you don't spend it in the right place, you don't get the right results. It's as simple as that. Gabi.
Again, before we move away from that, because I remember sometime in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, IMF had said that if we are borrowing, then we need to be able to tell what we're borrowing these monies for them to be able to make sure that they can get their monies back, or these monies are being put to use. So what about accountability? Because we can't have a democracy and then we're not focusing on accountability. Then that means that it's a circus, it's a free-for-all. How do we ensure accountability going forward, especially for a time like this in Nigeria's life?
We don't have a viable opposition. If you look at the American political system and the British political system, you know, it's almost, you know, 50-50, 49-48 to 50-51, and such that it forces the government to account to a large opposition in government. So there is a culture of ensuring that when the president is voted into power, the chunk of the legislature goes to the opposition, so that there is some level of accountability. We don't have that here. What we have is, in a way, another form of dictatorship, because whichever party is really the executive, 100% almost always controls the legislation. So nobody's holding anybody to account, because at the end of the day, they're going to go back to party meeting and resolve every issue and choose not to ask questions. And so it is a weakness in our democratic system that we need to correct. The opposition needs to have a voice, and they need to speak just like the way I'm speaking right now, without fear of favor, without fear that speaking out means that I will not be able to get decent businesses, or there's going to be some victimization, or the fear. That's why I say that, are we in a democracy or a militaryocracy? Because if we're in a democracy and there's freedom of speech, as long as I'm not insulting anybody, I should be able to ask anyone who is in power to be accountable. And that is not, and then the press, who should be doing it, unfortunately, look at the majority of the media. They are owned by politicians, owned by people who are connected to those in power. So they become lobbyists rather than those holding the government to account. So unfortunately, that's the weakness of the system we are in now, that we need to help these young people, this new generation, these emerging leaders that are speaking and screaming and shouting and asking our leaders to be accountable. We need to help them.
Finally, let's talk about corruption. It is something that's become endemic. It's eaten so deep into the fabrics of Nigeria's, system. And we're asking ourselves, how do we make sure that corruption is fought to a standstill, even if it's not completely fought, but at least, plug some of these loopholes? How do we ensure that?
Well, the biggest strength of the biggest teeth that anti-corruption fight has is holding people to account in the justice system. If you are caught, you should be able to pay for it. And as long as there's no impunity, corruption will go down. But another important thing is being proactive about managing corruption. If you have a civil servant with a university degree who is earning 1/10 of what a degree holder in the banking system and the oil and gas system is earning, you are creating a system that will make that civil servant potentially corruptible. And that's what is happening. When we are underpaying the people managing our economy, then corruption is going to increase. They're going to demand kickbacks. They're going to demand bribes. They're going to demand, well, it's not an accusation for all of them, but I'm saying this is the scenario. They're going to expect something from those who are benefiting from the civil servant, and that becomes a culture. So the culture of impunity then means that at the end of the day, you really can't fight corruption. Because when you try to fight corruption, you go to the legislature, 10 years you are still in court, because there is no will to come to the end of that case. The ICPC, the EFCC, all these organizations, they are filled with human beings, some of whom are still not well paid. So they are easily corruptible, by anybody who wants to corrupt them. And what we're really looking for now is leadership at every level that has just decided to rise up against the anomalies in the system and say, no, not under my watch. I'm going to change the culture. I'm going to change the way things are. And regardless of what happens to me at the end of the day, my conscience is clear that I've made Nigeria better. There's no other way to fight corruption. There's no other way. Even if you use technology, people will bypass it. If you any kind of system, the policies are there. The policies are there, but it's human beings are vulnerable. They're vulnerable. If you need to pay rent of 500,000 next month, and you only have 50,000 in your bank account, somebody comes to meet you and says, sign this document for this file, I'll give you 1 million. It's so easy because you don't have a backup. The bank is not going to loan you money averagely in this economy. There's no social safety net for the vast majority of people. So it's created a corruptible system. That's why I keep saying that investment in entrepreneurship and empowering people is the fastest way, because 70% of the economy belongs to the non-organized private sector, not the government. So the richer they are, the richer the country is. And the more people they employ, the better for tax collection. So we need to find the right balance between fighting corruption as if it's just one kind of entity, and the holistic look at the causes of corruption, and then make sure that we reduce its impact over the next 5-10 years, for whoever is coming in this year rather.
Well, I want to say thank you so much. Judge Ashiru is the chairman of the ADC here in Lagos State. Very great conversation that we've had tonight. When we're hoping also that Nigerians will all go get their PVC so that they can vote and make the right choice. Now, it's time for us to ask ourselves